Young man, I wish to speak to you today about pornography.
Every day I see men who wish they hadn't slipped off the edge and made their wives cry.
This was not a good thing to be doing, but like addiction happens, it just little by little, and I couldn't stop.
I was attacked by Satan from the cradle, and I never got a chance to experience mortality without this cloud over me.
I was so far gone that I had no idea whether it was the spirit or the adversary.
It's just a preconception that Satan has placed in us since coming into this world kind of as teenagers, that there's no way we could ever amount to anything.
Will you ever be rescued? Will you make it through your own survival story? The answer is yes.
This is a new weapon that Satan has been using.
Deception,
we're not talking
distraction,
about it.
discouragement.
I fight to watch men reaccess the power of God.
I am looking tonight.
It's not out there.
It's become far too normalized.
It's
for men, young and old.
I realize now that I am a warrior
who care enough about this battle between good and evil
against the adversary
to sign on and speak
if
up.
I turn my life around and be the person that they need.
We are at war. And for these next few minutes, I want to be a one-man recruiting station.
Welcome to the Eternal Warrior Podcast, helping young people in their quest for self-mastery, sharing stories from the battlefront against the war against Satan and pornography. I think that was the whole thing, and I will check it later. We've got a really fun thing lined up for today. Can't wait. We have the man, the myth, the legend himself, and Maurice Harker, the man who started it all. And we just me and Garrett wanted to take some time to pick into this guy's brain a little bit, see what started all of this. Why do we now have these warriors instead of knuckle-dragging, phone-consumed teenagers?
That's funny.
Yeah. How you doing, Maurice?
I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic. I'm a little tired. I've been working since 6 a.m. this morning, so I'm on my 14th hour with a few short breaks in between. Other than that, I'm fine.
Nice.
Well, dang. You like to stay on top of things.
There's things to do.
Oh, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Trying to schedule you is horrific for just having 30-minute conversations with you.
I know, and then I'm not sitting down, and then I don't contribute the way I'm supposed to. So we're going to be thorough and meaningful today, because I am focused.
And let me quickly shout out, we also have another guest, Susan here. Susan, why don't you unmute, give a little hello?
Salutations. It's great to be here.
She's part of the podcast crew and might chip in for some questions.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Yeah, pleasure to have you. Shall we get started then? So Maurice, what was what do you think started you on this journey for helping other people gain self-mastery?
Well, I hope that my story is more relatable than a Spider-Man bite in the middle of a science project where all of a sudden there's superpowers that takes place and you lay down, fall asleep, and wake up with big muscles and you can swing from tall buildings, although that's a really cool story. I wish that was the truth about my story.
That didn't happen to you? That's how my puberty went.
Happen. That's how my puberty. Well, that brings up the other part of the story. I appreciate your encouraging, characteristic description of me, but when I was in junior high, I literally was a small and simple person I wrestled one of the smallest weight classes, and I was pocket size, and it was difficult because I actually wanted to pursue women that young, but they were all 6 to 12 inches taller than me. And it's like, this is not working out so good.
Oh, man.
Because I had envisioned all these, Captain America type visions of myself, and didn't quite work out the way I'd planned. So I had envisioned myself starting on the basketball team, but I never got past 5'6", maybe 5'8" when I stand up straight. My senior year in high school, I was ready to dominate the football field, but for some reason my 135 pounds was not exciting for my football coaches. And so I resigned myself to being a wrestler. But with the Southeast Idaho exposure I had to religion and work ethic, etc., there were these little phrases like, by small and simple things are great things brought to pass. And I'm small, I'm simple. So that just kind of starts percolating within me. I fit the criteria
Spoke to you
perfectly.
directly.
Spoke exactly to me directly. My mother indirectly had some impact in ways. As she was raising 9 sons, I was the third of the 9 sons, and we would bring complex problems to Mom, and she would say this well-planned, systematic response. As the younger ones were yanking on her clothes and asking to be fed, she would do this thing where she would gesture like this, and she would say, "You're a smart boy, you can figure it out yourself. You're a smart boy, you can figure it out yourself." And after the 100th time we heard that, I started to believe her. Oh, I'm a smart boy, I can figure it out myself. Eli's been to some of my groups, and I have this very important phrase I will use from time to time in my group settings where I'll say to the gentlemen, "Brethren, let's pretend you're smart for a second." And they love
classic.
that. It's even with the adult men, they go, "Man, it's just empowering when you say that, Maurice. Let's pretend you're smart."
I gotta interrupt. I remember one time I was in group with you, and you'd brought this button in with like a recordable speaker on the back. And every time you hit the button, it would play back Maurice saying, "Let's pretend you're smart for a second."
Was it the red one, the green one,
oh my
or
gosh,
the blue
there it
one?
Is. What? It was the red one. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's a true story.
Right
I still have my buttons.
So,
all right, shall I continue?
As a clarification.
Oh, go ahead, Garrett.
As a clarification, there were 9 sons. Were there any daughters, or just 9 boys?
9 boys, no girls.
Wow. Dang. That is a testosterone-filled house right there.
Oh boy.
My mother had a few rules, like don't bleed on the carpet.
Oh boy.
Yes, those sound like accurate rules for boys.
They supported all the Darwinianism of our household. Survival of the fittest. One of my least favorite phrases over time, since I was third and I was small, my mother would often say to my older brothers as they were leaving with their friends, "Don't forget to take Maurice with you." As if I was a school backpack or a sack lunch. Okay?
Oh, man.
The dreaded phrase.
Yeah, and so eventually I don't want to, no. And so somehow I retained an element of excessive confidence in the midst of all this, like surplus. I've since learned that there must have been like a giant package of it somewhere. Then they sent me as a missionary to inner city Detroit. I actually started college as an engineer because I have a high math aptitude. I was known for being the obnoxious, short, smart kid. and I was thrown into garbage cans from time to time because I was so irritating. And so I got out there, and one of my favorite things about going on a mission, and when I heard that you could now, in the last several years, you could now call home every week or get on Zoom with them, that would have ruined my life. I really needed to not talk to my family of origin for a very long time, and I needed to reset. So I mentioned the engineering thing or the math thing because it plays a role later on. But I had been ambitious, if you will. So when I wanted to get better at wrestling, I learned if you practice, you can get better. I ended up being a high placer in the state tournaments. I picked up the violin when I was in 4th grade, and the nice thing about the violin is you start out so horrible, it becomes beautiful over time, and there's a big span. And so while I was never like a concert level of performance, it sounded good eventually. So I gained this testimony of if you work hard, you get better, until they sent me to Detroit. Okay. And I tried this door approach and that door approach and this door approach and that door approach and and like it was a nightmare because no matter what I tried, I couldn't get results. I'd heard somewhere along the way that the average number of baptisms in Detroit during my time there was 1 per 2 years. 1 baptism per 2 years. And so after 6 months of this, we would usually teach only about 2 to 3 lessons per week. So you'd be doing a lot of walking and talking. Well, one of the benefits of what I experienced as a missionary is I discovered the empty, echoing chambers of my mind pretty early, where the chaos of having 8 brothers and all the other stuff going on that's a lot of noise in your brain. You don't really notice how big your own voice is. And I started realizing there wasn't a whole lot going on in my head. And it didn't take very long for me to be pulled towards some unfortunate thinking. I'm grateful that my ambition popped in a little bit around that time, and the idea of memorizing scriptures was suggested, and I had nothing better to do. So I was embarrassingly slow, but I heard rumors that you can solicit. Thomas Monson was one of the presidency of the church at the time, and he talked about his memorizing things. And so I learned the power of prayer. Heavenly Father, help me get better and better at memorizing things. And Eli's heard me talk about this before. Is I was introduced to a phrase where you can really get God to participate, and it's been helpful for 3 decades since then, is at the end of asking for anything in a prayer, you add the phrase, for the sake of the people. For the sake of the people. Yeah. And I learned you can almost blackmail God with that phrase. Okay? Because once you say for the sake of the people, it's like he has to give it to you now. Okay? It's like, oh, okay.
Boy. Yeah.
And so my ability to memorize. Go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, that's God's role is the immortality and eternal life. The eternal joy of all of his children, and anything you do towards that end is part of his work, and you're really blessed in that. So that definitely checks out.
Well, one of the things that started to happen is an amazing pattern of the verse I just happened to memorize that day or the day before would be useful to someone that we were teaching, like magically. And I'm like, now everyone thinks I just happen to memorize just the right stuff, or I have all these things memorized, so it looks like I've got tons memorized. With the help of divine assistance, I eventually did, over the course of 9 months, memorize 450 scriptures, which, by the way, is really useful for cross-referencing, because you can just cross-reference in your head. Okay?
You're walking,
and it's been very helpful.
Standard works.
Well, and it really makes it easy. So if someone tries to teach me false doctrine, I don't have to go look it up. I can just look it up in my head to see if it's false doctrine or not. Well, as we were
Right.
going along, one day, one of the most pivotal moments, I don't know that we met this woman more than once, but we met a woman who showed some interest. And as she was listening, she was another one of those people that was in a tough way in inner city Detroit, and she just stopped us and she says, Elder Harker, can you explain to me what this stuff has to do with my real life issues?
Hmm.
And my amazing response was something like, I have no idea. Okay, having
Hey,
raised in an LDS culture, what's that?
Shoot.
I was just gonna say that's, humility in action right there. Sometimes that's the
Well,
best answer.
it was more of a spontaneous awareness of my own stupidity at the time, or my lack of information, because I wasn't trying to be humble. It was more like I actually didn't know. Because having been raised in an LDS culture, I never learned how to apply the stuff to my real life issues. It was like church is over here and real life is over here, and there was never really a lot of bridges built. And so I was so mortified by that experience that I really committed myself to figure out, how does this a verse apply to someone's real life issues? How does this verse? So as I continued to memorize, I kept thinking and pondering with each verse, how does this verse apply to someone's real life issues? Garrett, did you have another comment or question?
Well, I was just gonna say that some people have humility and others have humility thrust upon them.
I have had that many times, many times. And so as I continued this, I had lots of other important experiences as a missionary, but then I came home and I did the normal crash and burn phase of being a return missionary, at least what I was familiar with. I was engaged twice my first year home from my mission, and I ruined both of those. Okay. My sexual self-mastery issues from my teenage years resurfaced and started to invade my life, and I was ambitious there where I wanted to have a healthy marriage, and the agony of, I'm not stupid, I should be able to acquire self-mastery with the same methods I'd used before. If you want to get better at playing the violin, you do this. If you want to get better at wrestling, you do this. If you want to get better at math, you do this. And so one of the reasons I started studying psychology and I switched my major to psychology was to figure myself out. Okay. And with some things, I have a tendency to get a little enthusiastic, that my father might have called obsessed. Okay. And he's all, my kid that was raised on a farm is getting really weird. He's starting to study lots of stuff. And he did another one of those little one-liners where he said, just as a reminder, to be learned is wise if you hearken to the counsels of God. And that was, I already had a testimony of that, but it was very helpful to have that reminded to me as I was leaning into academics. And I had just enough of a spark of testimony that prophets are smart. And that previous question from the woman, prophets understand psychology. And so the simple question of, what if God was a good psychologist? And I'm like, well, that's a dumb statement. Of course he's a good psychologist. And then what if you could get him to explain psychology to you? See, now that would be awesome. And so I sat down with him and I got my notebook out and I says, I'm ready for you to explain psychology to me. And he's all, I'm grateful for your enthusiasm, but after you've studied every general conference talk you can get your hands on, then I will fill in the blanks. So at the time, the conference talks went back to 1971, which they're still available. So all you have to do, in addition to memorizing 450 verses, is review every general conference talk since 1971 at least 3 times, and maybe more in addition to that.
Oh, man.
And so when someone says, I wish I could understand psychology the way you do, it reminds me of when someone says, man, I sure wish I could play the violin like that person up on the stage. And you're like, Well, you could if you actually practice as much as they do.
Right.
So when
That's
my
gotta be
apprentices say,
over 1,000 hours of listening right there.
listening, reading, marking, listening, reading, marking, etc., etc., etc. Now, part of my motivation is a personal issue. I hate feeling stupid. Okay? And the last thing I want to do is be teaching somebody something and find out later I taught them the wrong thing. That is not fun for me. So I have worked for 30 years to make sure everything I teach is in harmony with the prophets, which, by the way, once you start working with real people and their actual psychology and their lives and their marriages are in your hands, it feels a little bit like being a brain surgeon with the skull open and you're realizing you're holding a spoon and a knife above someone's brain and you could destroy them or you could help them. And you might want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay?
No kidding.
So that was a high motivator for me. But before I even thought of getting serious about the field of psychology, I was aware that I had to get my own issues together. So simultaneously, I got to figure myself out. And I finally reached that point of I'm done messing around as a return missionary. I'm ready to be a man. I'm ready to be a grown man. And I had a testimony that when you're ready to become an adult, you go to God and you say, I'm ready to be a tool in your hands because I trust that you can make more of my life than I can myself. And I am volunteering for the battalion. And he said, it's about time. I mean, I'm glad. Good. And so I'm reaching for swords and I'm reaching for spears and I'm reaching for shields. And he goes, no. You're volunteering, so go talk to Moroni and get your assignment. So I go to Moroni and then I look for the swords and the spears and the shields. And he goes, no. And he hands me a pair of binoculars. And I'm all, what am I supposed to do with binoculars? And then he says, Harker, see that tree over there, like 1.5 miles away from civilization, on the edge of our civilization? He says, I want you to go sit in that tree and study the Lamanites. And then come back and tell us what they're doing. So I didn't know there was such a thing as being a scout. And when I was leaving to go do my job, I was noticing lots of other people were on the temple building committee and the gardening committee and the Marines and the Air Force and all this stuff. And I'm like walking by myself, like I'm the only guy like going out there. And they say, have fun. You have a really important job. We just want you to study Satan for a decade or two and then come back and tell us what you found out. And I'm all, that's really weird. Who does that? You do that. Okay?
Oh, man.
So now I was enough of a military strategist. I get the concept, know thine enemy, get a clue what's going on over there. I had no idea that Satan was as strategic as he is. We hear these little phrases, the serpent is the most subtle of all the beasts of the field, and other things like that he's very strategic. And more I learned about him, I'm like, he's strategic, he's intelligent, he's ruthless, he's cruel, he's mean, he's sneaky. And it's like, you get to know his personality, like, that man. I mean, we hear stories about what's going on across the ocean and other places, like, hey, these guys are teaching children to kill adults and they're carrying guns around. Or, hey, over here, we're throwing women and children into fire pits and stuff like that. And you're like, who gives them this idea? Where do these ideas come from? What kind of person suggests that stuff?
Yeah. I'll chip in.
Please.
Largely inspired by your work, I'm writing another book. I'm writing a book on agency, and a big part of that is knowing Satan's personality. And it's just, it makes so much sense when you think about it. Just like, first you have to agree that humanity is not inherently evil, because that's one of the other explanations that scientists have for why there is so much evil in the world. And then you also have to say, well, there are these terrible thoughts that come into my head that don't come from anywhere else and wouldn't come from me naturally. It's so obvious that there is an outside force who's able to sneak thoughts into your head like an anti-Holy Ghost. It's crazy.
Go ahead, Gary.
Just a question for you, because you've mentioned, you spent years studying and scouting for the Lord. What kind of emotions did that bring up in you? Because I know as I spent more time seeking and learning and trying to discover Satan's strategies against me, I kind of got angry. So I'm curious, like, as you looked into this from a far more professional level than perhaps I have, what kind of emotions did that bring up in you?
Well, interestingly, I wouldn't say at the time it was on a professional level. I wasn't like in a master's program yet. A lot of it was for myself. And I did experience that same anger, but I didn't know the science behind the anger would lead me to understand warrior chemistry.
Okay.
And so I was experiencing spontaneously the experience of warrior chemistry in a unrefined form. And then later on, I would understand the science behind it and how it works to help someone who is an underdog to access the psychological energy to win when you're the underdog.
That's crazy. So it was kind of this inherent part of you. It was kind of just this concept.
Well, everyone has
of warrior
it, so
chemistry.
it's inherent with everybody.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Like, it seems like God handed you that tool to use in your battles, so that you could later teach it to us. And I think that's really cool.
To build upon that theme for just a second,
just real quick, for our listeners, would you mind explaining what warrior chemistry is in a 2-sentence summary?
I will be brief about it. Let me address Eli's comment, and then I'll bring that one into the answer as well. If you look at my material and you look at my lessons, you look at everything, I spend very little effort to copyright what I do, because I'm very clear that I am not the originator of the concepts. I think of myself as an archaeologist of eternal principles, not a creator of eternal principles. And so I find them, I dust them off, I clean them off, I make them available. I find them, I dust them off, I clean them off, make them available. And so finding these tools, finding these weapons, it takes work to find them, and there's a lot of work to look for them, but I don't create them. I just find them and share them. And one of them is this phenomena of warrior chemistry. Okay. Now, the simplest way to explain warrior chemistry without getting fully technical, and by the way, in the Like Dragons Did They Fight book, it's well written out, but I've also done some supplemental writings to elaborate on it even further. And I've got two different ways of describing it. I've got the explain it to an 8th grader so he gets it concept, and explain it to a complex scientist so they get it. But sometimes the scientists think there is no scientific explanation because they heard my 8th grade explanation. Okay, so the starting point for it is, first I check to see if the person is familiar with all the movies that have a sports hero or a martial arts hero. Kung Fu Panda is a wonderful representation of this concept. And there's a scene in almost every one of these movies where the hero is laying on his face in the mud about to give up.
Right.
Okay, everyone know that scene? Okay. And statistically speaking, he should just lay there and wave a white flag. But then the music changes. Okay. And the creators of the movies know that all human beings have a trigger point for warrior chemistry or mother bear chemistry. If you're a woman, it's more accurately described as mother bear chemistry. and we feel the sensation of fighting to win. And as you study sports psychology, you learn that that very chemical shift is the game changer. Because if the person who was winning loses that chemical dynamic, they now start to stumble, they now start to fall apart, they start to crack.
Right.
So that is at the highest level of sports, that is the determining factor, because they're equal in athleticism. Now, there's a motivational drive when, and you'll see this in different books, movies, especially if the author or the creator is a little more aggressive with their willingness to move the audience. Okay, if you have one who's got some motivation, he will use a sports story so that you can feel how exciting it is to come back and win in football or tennis or soccer. There's the next level where it's not about a sport, it's life or death.
Mm-hmm.
So now we ratchet it up a step. Okay? Then are really skilled, but most of them are hesitant to use this because it's so powerful. They change it from your life is threatened to your child's life is threatened if you don't succeed. Or your mother's life is threatened, or your sister's life is threatened. And then the audience just goes up a whole nother notch of intensity.
And they fought
so
for
you
their
thought
wives
you were
and their lives and their children and for their freedom. Therefore, they exerted themselves.
So they fought
like
for their lives.
Did they fight?
And that's where the title of the book comes from, is Like Dragons Did They Fight, is when you experience the biochemical shifting that moves you beyond an athletics motivation, beyond survival yourself, but to the point where you're now ready to fight to the death for the protection of loved ones.
Yeah, that is,
and
for reference, that is Mosiah 20:11, if anyone was wondering.
Garrett, you have a thought?
Yeah, I personally know that is a biochemical shift in our bodies, but many people don't. And so, I mean, clearly you did research into that and understand that, but so you can with confidence say that is a shift of chemistry in your body. It's not just, it's not some ethereal thing that we can try to achieve. Yeah. It's a real shift in body chemistry.
15 years ago, it took me like 4 weeks to do all the research on that. Okay. If you really want to know how that works, you just sit down with ChatGPT for like 2 minutes.
Nowadays.
And you just ask the question and it'll tell you exactly how it works. And it'll name the chemicals, it'll name the shifts in the chemicals, it'll explain how it all works. And so I'm less motivated to explain the science behind it because people can do the research themselves.
Right,
Yeah.
but you can confirm that it is real science.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely real science. Everything we do is real science. I don't use religious concepts to promote a religion. I use religious concepts because they are scientifically more accurate than anything I found in science.
Right.
Okay.
Ooh,
and so when someone
crazy.
says you're trying to promote a religion, I'm like, no, I just have not found a concept that's more accurate than the one I found in this religion.
I think I'd like that on a plaque.
Oh, me too, man. Me too. We'll start selling it at the merch store.
That's right.
So I got enough information to gain enough self-mastery to convince a woman to marry me. And
that's a high milestone.
Well, it was a higher milestone than I thought because she had the whole female diamond in a rough view of me. And she is polite about not describing how much rough was there. Okay. And she believed that with a little polishing, not by her, because she refuses to polish. She has rules. She is a wife, not a mother. And she refuses to mother me, even if I flounder for long periods of time. And she uses a very similar phrase like unto what my mother used. She just says, "You're smart, you'll figure it out." And so I study some more. And so I chose psychology because I found that the human brain was more interesting than numbers. I also found out that human brains can be figured out. I actually went through a very important tributary for a phase. 2 months after I got married, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer. I had just finished my bachelor's degree. They had a multi-level marketing business that they asked me to help with as she went through her treatments. So for the next 3-4 years, I learned a lot about business, referral-based businesses. And so she passed away, and that was sad. But I gained lots of skill in knowing what it was like to run a large organization with lots of people and get the systemic side of it down. One of the important concepts they taught is you have to create a replication system so people half your intelligence can keep repeating it or replicate it. So I didn't know that years later, when Sons of Human started, I would need to set it up such that it could be replicated because I didn't have time to run all the groups. And I needed to have it such that it could be repeated and repeated and repeated by other clinicians. And then Men of Moroni, the Worth Group, Daughters of Light, Eternal Warriors all had to follow the same template. And so this diversion, Elder Gong's talk from this most recent conference that I'm sure you all are familiar with because you recently studied it. Oh, wait, that's my job. I am responsible to make sure I'm familiar with all the conference talks. And so his conference talk is titled, All Things Work for the Good of Them Who Love God. And so whenever there's a diversion, it can be used to your benefit. And so eventually after that phase was over, I went back to school. I had some invitations to move that forward. And then my first job at LDS Family Services was with the pre-mission assessments. My supervisor says, no one else wants this job, and you're naive and ambitious enough that we can give it to you. And he says, you've got 1 hour to decide if this person can spend 2 years as a missionary. Ready, go. And I'm all, cool.
That's where that came.
Okay. And so I started interviewing the guys, and in both cases it was rubber stamp, grab the rubber stamp, pass, good to go, green light. But guess what the most common thing was that stalled guys out from leaving was reoccurring patterns of sexual self-mastery issues, formerly known as a pornography problem.
Right.
Okay? And then no one else wanted to take these guys on as clients. So I was fine with it because I was raised with boys. I was raised in locker rooms with boys. I was raised with stinky boys that were boys. Okay? And then one day, after about 6 months of this, I was like agonizingly trying to help one guy figure it out. And he said the most annoying thing that they say, I don't think you get it. You don't understand what I'm going through. And I'm all like, I'm 32. I'm not like I'm 82. Okay, I was your age like a week ago. They're like, you're old. And one day I was walking out with one of these guys who was definitely classified as one of the noble and great ones of the final generation. And the guy coming into my office was another of the noble and great ones of the final generation. And the idea was if I could just introduce them to each other. If I could just have these two guys sit across from each other and have this experience of relatability. And I brought it up with my supervisor and he said, won't work. I'm all, okay, how come? He's all, it's been tried. Okay. Whenever a parent enrolls the kid in the class, he hates it more than his preschool. He hates showing up because it's embarrassing. and he doesn't
Just
like
saying something.
telling people how much of a pervert he is, and they just sit there, and it's hard enough to go to priest quorum and try to talk when all you do is like feel mortified by the experience, and then they just stop coming back. And at first that confused me because I'm going like, why would you set it up like that? Okay.
Right.
Now, but by now, I had gained my testimony of Satan as a military strategist. I understood his mindset and his psychology because of the battles I had learned how to fight with him. Okay. And then because of my history with my brothers in sports and the sports psychology, and then the concept of the Knights of the Round Table, do we all not fight the same enemy? Are we all not fighting dragons? Do we not all work together to be there for each other and encourage each other to go attack and fight? When were the Knights of the Round Table ever ashamed to sit around the round table?
Right. Never. Is the
So what if
answer.
I
The
could
answer
create
is never.
What if you could fill a room with a bunch of guys who felt like heroes when they showed up to the meetings instead of like perverts?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I had one of the most phenomenal experiences as I was going through this phase, and I was pondering and trying to ponder, figure it out, trying to ponder and figure it out, etc., etc. The original handbook, Like Dragons Do They Fight, was written in one night, and it hasn't changed since.
Wow.
The original handbook was 30 pages, and I just typed. I took everything, all the concepts came together. One of the most important ones was open enrollment instead of what they call closed enrollment, because if you got a whole bunch of guys who feel awkward who all start at the same time, then you got to spend 3 weeks trying to fix the awkwardness.
Yeah.
But if you got 7 guys who are already in rhythm with each other, and then you bring one new guy into that, then he instantly is pulled into the river of energy, and he's confused, fascinated, and empowered all at once. He's like, what is going on here? He comes up the stairs to the office, and he's got guys high-fiving each other, chest bumping each other, knuckle bumping each other. They're excited to be here, and he's all, am I in the wrong place? Like, what is going on here?
I thought this was the meeting for perverts.
Yeah. And so,
that's huge. Yeah,
what was that like for you, Eli?
Oh, maybe you remember this, but there was one time I walked in to group back when before I was a general, and I was kind of pissed off at this guy because he ended up enrolling late and getting to general status before I did.
Just a quick explanation. Quick explanation for those listening. A general is what you become once you've graduated from the program. That's what we call you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll have to dive more into that another time. Or you can look it up. You have the book. It's free.
It's right
so
there. You have the
this
book.
guy, I knew him from school. And I walk into group, and he's sitting there on the sofa, and I'm like, yo, you're here. That's awesome. And he sits there and he looks at me. He's like, oh, this is awkward. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm so glad you're here. and he was wondering, like, why are you glad that I'm here? Aren't we like, perverts? And I'm like, well, I knew you were struggling. I was just worried why you weren't here sooner. And you turned it into a really great experience, because you asked during the course of our bonding together. You said something like, what do you see in your friend here? What do you think of him? Speak your mind for a second. And I said, well, I was just kind of awkwardly fumbling around, and I decided well, I think he's an awesome guy, and I think if he's really smart and social, and I think if anyone can overcome this addiction, he definitely can. And he immediately just started bawling his eyes out, and I did not expect that at all. And so it was so powerful. I was just awkwardly patting him on the shoulder from the side and just letting him give it out. And he, those are just powerful moments, when the guys can come into a group like that.
Part of
Can
the
I just say
advantage to the... Go ahead, Garrett.
No, you finish your thought, and then I'll go.
Part of the advantage of an open enrollment dynamic is you also have the other end of the spectrum where you have guys who are the more advanced. And when you have a classroom where you have a leader and you have followers, it is unfortunate that there's so many times when the followers are always followers. They never have a psychological transition. And so we set it up such that you go from being a awkward and lacking confidence beginner until, if the group leader is running it correctly, he gives a lot of responsibility to the advanced guys to teach the new guys. Says, hey, you've learned this concept, please explain it to new guy. You understand this concept, please explain it to new guy. And you watch people, and if you ever have a chance to listen to Eli, as when he comes into a group session in person, when he comes to mine, first of all, the guys think it's like Michael Jordan when he walks in the door, because like, oh my gosh, it's Eli. He's like a hero. He's one of the OGs, and he's amazing, and we learned so much from him. And I role model that a bit. Like if a guy walks in the room who's a general I haven't seen for a while, I make sure everybody knows that like royalty has just walked in the room. And some of the new guys
so
are like,
weird.
who is that? Like, what
That's
is,
so not
why
my
is that guy?
personality.
Which is cool because that's what we want. You like, a little too much here. But then the guys go, wow, you're going to do this with me at some point? And one of my favorite meetings, we're going to have it tomorrow. It's a once every other month meeting, once a quarter meeting. It's called the Generals Panel. And a Generals Panel is when we gather a handful of graduates and we put them on a little panel, and all the moms and dads and church leaders and others who have heard about us, but they don't want to hear from me whether or not what we have to offer is powerful. So I take the generals, the graduates, and I say, you know what? There's people out here who have the following question, because most people don't want to say their question out loud, like, how long have you been a pervert? You know, I have learned to craft the question in a way that is more useful. Like, how long have you been fighting these battles? How old were you when Satan first started attacking you? And then they start talking. And the confusing thing is, like, these guys are talking with confidence. They're talking with pride. They're talking like Knights of the Round Table. And it's kind of fun. And then you get the moms and dads going, I really wish my son would talk like that. Garrett, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were this, you know, I did not have the privilege of going through the program as a teenager. And I did not find myself in a situation where I could go to the program until I was, you know, a married adult with several children. But I jumped in with both feet and really tried to immerse myself in all the activities and the communication and the relationships. And I remember, and Maurice, you'll probably remember this. I remember, you know, just a few months ago, we were at the men's retreat, and we were closing, you know, having just some closing remarks. And I remember, for the first time ever in the 16 plus years that I've been dealing with this, despite knowing all the time that I was not alone in this, that's no mystery. I know that this is a common problem, but for the first time ever, I didn't feel alone. And so how inspiring it is that you did keep it open enrollment, that you did have, those experienced members there to help those that were just starting, because I was just starting, and this wasn't even that long ago. Within the last year, I was just starting. I was, jumping in with both feet while still being nervous because I still felt alone. And it was, very quickly I learned I wasn't.
Did we successfully provide
watching,
you?
Susan just gave a heart to Garrett during that soliloquy. That was awesome.
Yeah, because I don't have a way to do it any other way. And I'm just sitting here watching Garrett share about how the adversary is, oh, who'da thunk it, a bully, isolating him and convincing him that he is all by his little lonesome dealing with this monster. I mean, if that isn't the definition of a seriously sick bully, I don't know what is.
Satan. It's just the worst.
No, you got a point. You got a point. And the open enrollment is such a huge deal, because the first group meeting I went to, I saw people who were a week into it, and one member of the group who was 1,138 days into it and still faithfully coming to group meeting every single week.
Oh man.
Did we successfully give you the confusing experience of men who were excited and proud to be there?
Absolutely.
Can you explain what that looks like when you're expecting something different? Like, when you see these men, they're proud to be there, they're showing off their skills, they are enthusiastic, as opposed to what one might experience in a traditional priest quorum where they don't really want to be there. What did you see?
Well, the first thing, I remember the first group meeting I went to, and when, the entire group cheerfully welcomed me to the group, asked me about myself, got information, and we went from, and things just went uphill from there. And it was like a month and a half after I joined that the men's retreat occurred. And I got that email just days after registering for Men of Moroni, and that said, don't miss out, come to the men's retreat. And I was like, I do I want to go to a house with a bunch of other weirdos like me? Like, I don't
That's the thought.
But then, the men's retreat ended up being in the very city I live in. Like, it was right here, and it was a fantastic price, and I'm like, okay, maybe God's trying to tell me something. Yeah. That's right.
What did you see with those men? What did you experience with them that was different than what you thought?
Every person that was there was proud to be fighting and proud to share their fights with others. There were men there that had gone through far worse than anything I've gone through with my addiction. Not that it's a comparison. It's not a competition, but they'd gone through far worse, and they were fully open and proud of the fight that they had and the fight they continued to do, and their ability to share that fight with others. And that was mind-blowing, because it had just never occurred to me that other people felt that way. I felt that way, for years before joining Men of Moroni. I would approach my bishop, because I was a student, so I moved around quite a bit. I would approach my bishop and I'd say, I struggle with this. I'm doing my best. I will keep you informed. But if you know anybody in the ward who needs somebody to talk to about this, who needs somebody who understands, I don't give a flying leap about anonymity. You give them my name, and I'll talk to them. Right? I can be their support for them, and not once until 7 months ago did a single bishop take me up on that offer. 7 months ago, the bishop I have currently took me up on the offer and said, "Hey, there are several men in the ward who'd like to meet together and talk through with this. Would you mind spearheading it?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I will." And that's how I was introduced to Men of Moroni. That's how this whole thing started. And seeing other people who had that same attitude that I had wanted to share to others, yeah, I just, heartwarming. That's what it was, heartwarming.
Thank you. So I wanted to interject, as we're running out of time here, a piece of science that is not taught by the scientists. Okay. It is the responsibility of the psychologist to find the most accurate explanation for the psychological experience and empower their clients to be mentally healthy and feel confident with the use of that. Okay. I don't know. Well, I actually went to a presentation by a spiritual psychologist who explained the history of why the field of psychology decided one day to make sure they were not contaminated by spiritual concepts. So once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a bit of an argument between the religionists and the scientists. They had a little meeting and they agreed, as scientists, we won't talk about religion. As religion people, we won't talk about science.
Right. Okay? I have a whole
And
chapter about that in my book.
Thank you. I'm glad you are. But even the term psychology, ology means study of. If you go back to the origin, psych means spirit, but they've now twisted it to mean the mind. So the profession was supposed to be the study of the spirit. Okay, now here's where this becomes even more relevant. All right. There's a very popular phrase that is horrifying to me after studying the science of what we do for a long time, and that is the phrase, "You are your own worst enemy."
Mm-hmm.
You are your own worst enemy. If you expand that to a few psychological principles, you mix in a little bit of Freud and a couple other people, you can phrase it like this: you have a portion of your brain that you won't be able to find or identify that strategically tries to ruin your day. Okay? And we have to assume that it's in your brain because there's no way we're going to consider that it comes from somewhere outside of your brain.
Right.
So now we encourage you to go on a snipe hunt looking for a part of your brain that is self-destructive. Now, you won't ever find it because it's not actually in your brain, but you should spend a lifetime looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then they wonder why we're psychologically exhausted trying to find the solution. All right? And then if someone implies, which implies that you're doing it to yourself, so the solution is to punish or shut down. So the psychological interventions become something like under chemotherapy, because in order to kill the bad part of your brain, you have to kind of squash everything in your brain. And because you can't find it, you stop trusting yourself, you get hopeless, you get confused. And the part that makes me angry is, imagine if someone came to you and just said, "I'd really like to learn how to fix my lawnmower," and they keep telling you the wrong thing to do to fix your lawnmower.
Yeah.
Why would that be frustrating? Why would that be irritating? You're a scientist, Garrett. Imagine someone tells you the wrong way to do your science and you spend all your energy, then they say you just lack motivation to fix your lawnmower.
Yeah. Absolutely frustrating. It would, I mean, believe it or not, it happens a fair amount of the time when I'm a chemist, so I do a lot of chemistry, related things, but it happens a fair amount of time where you're like, I want to make this molecule. Somebody's done it in the past and they published it. And so you go and you get their instructions and you go follow their instructions, but because some small detail was left out, you can't reproduce it. And if you contact them, generally they're quite hostile towards you. And they're like, well, you must be doing it wrong.
Oh man. Yeah. And I see that in
Okay.
I see that in psychology class. That one, I took a little bit of psychology in college, and yeah, it's I felt my spirit kind of like go away. It's so confusing, and there's not a lot of answers right now.
So the
And
closest
as a
thing the
psychology
profession of
major,
go
as
ahead.
a psychology major, I put it in the chat. After finding these answers here, I despise that phrase that Maurice shared earlier of that it's your brain, it's your problem, it's all in your mind. Like you're self-sabotaging, or
Mm-hmm.
you just need to change your thoughts. And I'm like, okay, yes, that's like part of the picture, but you know what? It's not my fault I have bad thoughts.
Oh boy.
Thank you. So to wrap up here, finally, somewhere, I don't know exactly how long ago it was, someone finally introduced the idea of intrusive thoughts, and it was found in some psychology journal somewhere. And I started researching it, and so they're finally acknowledging that there are thoughts that can enter your mind against your will, against your desires. But I kept asking, well, where do the thoughts come from? Where do they come from? Where do they come from? Where do they come from? And the most advanced scientists, the best they could say is, we don't know. And so I'm looking forward to when they go, oh, we should have thought about this before. We should have taken this into consideration. And so I'm looking forward to the day when the scientists decide that it's now time to acknowledge reality. There is an entity called the Holy Ghost. There is an entity called Christ who provides an atonement. There are eternal principles that are not maneuverable any more than the laws of physics and the laws of chemistry are maneuverable. You can get a better understanding and work with them, but they're not. The laws aren't going to just change. Okay,
Yeah.
and the laws, the role that Satan plays in things is science. It's not religion. It's science.
Right.
And if you understand it, you can win the battle. If you don't, you won't. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful for everyone. I've got to step away. Garrett, while Eli is rejoining us, I'll let you play the role of host.
Yeah, absolutely.
To our podcast.
Thank you, Maurice, for all of your insights. It seems to me that, early on you mentioned that you added to your prayers for the people. And it seems to me that has become a driving factor in all of your life. Thank you.
It's more enjoyable
than
doing things for myself. It's really
Absolutely.
fun. It's really fun to watch people feel awesome. It's fun to empower people. I didn't know it was that much fun. But once I understood how to have fun with it, just take another person who feels like crud and help them feel powerful. It's a lot of fun. Okay, I got to go.
For sure.
We'll see you next time. I'll be here next week.
Thank you, Maurice.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. What an opportunity, man, to talk to Maurice. It is so cool. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. My thing bugged out for a little bit. Me and my friend were talking about him one day and observing how group was going. And my friend made the comment to me like, this is just how young men should go. Honestly. He's like the ultimate young men's leader. with these principles. And in a sense, this trial, this challenge that we all face, brings us together in a way that we can all be open and honest about our journey through life. And I just think, if we had that perspective, just in our Sunday school classes, or just when we have these deep discussions with each other, if we're aware that we are these spiritual beings having a mortal experience, and we're all brothers and sisters trying to help each other out here, it really flips the perspective on the battle.
For sure.
And it really confounds the adversary right then and there, because he's busy trying to isolate everybody and have them think they're the only ones struggling the way that they are, and have them live in this space of desperate isolation, thinking they cannot possibly open up to anyone else. They couldn't possibly dare to do that. And he's just laughing over there going, ha ha ha, look at you. And it's just, yeah, right? Like, I mean, just the sickest bully. So, yeah, I think that, when we do exactly what you're describing, Eli, we're really confounding his effort to be that bully right from the get-go, just doing that.
Right. Wow, this has been amazing. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, just to finish things off, there is no shame in letting people know that you're a warrior. The shame only comes in when you let them know that you quit.
And yet, what shield battle partner is going to be sitting there going, oh, I'm so glad you never told me that you fell in battle right next to me when I was counting on you to let me know what was going on because I needed you by my side.
Right.
Like,
right.
You have to be straight with your battle buddies because they're counting on you, because you're the one that keeps them from being isolated. So
that's crazy.
For sure.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, that's the end of our thoughts. That's the top of the hour, and what a cool lesson. I had one of those moments during this podcast where I was just like, wow, I can't believe that I'm actually here doing this. Like, I think it was in the middle of your story, Garrett. Like, oh my gosh, the fact that we're all here together talking about these things is just tremendous. And for all of you who are in listener land, who are feeling akin to these stories and are fighting the good fight, maybe you're in a group, maybe you're not, please send your thoughts to podcast@lifechangingservices.org and let us know how it's going. And if you have any thoughts, if you want to give us a review, that's cool. That's always helpful. And you can always find the information to the website and any other relevant information in the show notes. We'll be getting that out to you. Please take the assessment that's featured on the website if you're looking for a service. And we'll be welcoming you with open arms as our brothers and sisters in the fight.
Absolutely.
Until we meet again.
Check us out at lifechangingservices.org is that website.
Yes. lifechangingservices.org. Yeah.
Thanks, Garrett, for keeping us on track.
No problem. Until next time, everybody.
Yeah. Promise to be of service to you. Allow you to be of service to me, until both you and I successfully defeat this demon that assails us.
Amen.
Thank you.
If you're listening to this podcast, you have probably found that you are in need of, you are strongly desiring, a level of self-mastery that you have not been able to achieve on your own. Or you are a loved one or a parent who knows someone who would like to achieve that level of self-mastery. It's not fun to be in that situation. Been there, done that. I've become a specialist in this area by spending 30 years initially searching for and harvesting eternal principles found in the world of psychology, science, and the words of the prophets, many of them found in the Book of Mormon. For my own sake first, and then I found that they're of great value to others. Instead of just hoarding these concepts, we put them into a book form that is easy for you to access. Like Dragons Did They Fight? You'll understand the reason why it's called that when you start reading it. But go to likedragonsfree.com, get your own free copy of it, download it, and then when you're ready to talk over your circumstances and make a battle plan, call 877-HERO 877. In other words, 877-4376. Talk to our headquarters people, and if necessary, they'll arrange for you to have a consultation with me. I am sad that you're going through this, but I've watched thousands and thousands of young warriors gain the confidence and strength they need to be able to have the lives they want now and the futures they desire to have. We will see you soon.